Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I just want to remind everyone that we will be recording this webinar and sending it out to all of you later this afternoon or in the next day or so. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Linda, to kick us off.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Linda Vasquez, and I am the Senior Director of Public Affairs for the Campaign for College Opportunity. And I want to thank, I can't see how many participants are joining us today, over 200. I want to thank the 200 plus people across the state who are spending their morning with us for this very important conversation. You can advance to the next few slides, Alonso. I'd like to thank the Foundation for Community Colleges, the California Community College Chancellor's Office, our partners at Chabot and Mount SAC for their partnership and leadership in putting this conversation together, and for rapidly mobilizing efforts to support our undocumented students across the state. And again, thank you to all of the undocumented allies across the state, including those who weren't able to join us today, for your relentless efforts to ensure that undocumented students' dreams are not disrupted during this time. Again, on behalf of the Campaign for College Opportunity, I want to thank you all for joining us today. The campaign, for those of you who are not familiar with our work, is a broad-based research, policy, and advocacy organization that is dedicated to ensuring that every eligible Californian has a real shot at going to college. Our policy efforts are centered on promoting racial equity approaches to making college accessible, affordable for our most low-income students, and eliminating structural barriers to completion. We are here today to share some immediate ways that undocumented allies in the community college space can support undocumented students during this time. There is growing confusion about who can and cannot receive CARES Act funding, and any day now, the Supreme Court will announce their decision about the future of DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. The lives of undocumented students across the state and across the nation are in limbo, and every day they wake up filled with anxiety, fear, and uncertainty about their future. But before we get started on those strategies and how you can be an advocate in support of our undocumented students, I want to acknowledge that at this very moment, protesters are sweeping through the nation in the name of justice for George Floyd and the countless attacks and murders of unarmed Black bodies. The Campaign for College Opportunity joins the public outcry for justice and change with community leaders, demonstrators, and organizations in all 50 states and countries around the world. We stand with Black Lives Matter. We understand that true allyship is an active and continuous practice, and that solidarity means very little without action. As we have done over the past 16 years, the campaign will continue to push for anti-racist policies that dismantle long-standing oppressive structures in our society. And our unwavering commitment to social justice also includes supporting the college aspirations of an estimated 90,000 undocumented students enrolled in California's public colleges and universities, most of them enrolled in our California community colleges. So if you go on to the next slide, Alonso, I want to share a little bit about a coalition that we are a part of. In response to the national uncertainty and adverse political climate in 2017 facing undocumented students, the California Undocumented Higher Education Coalition was founded. It is a network of educators, civil rights, business, philanthropy, students, community-based orgs, that advocate for policy solutions and resources that support undocumented students in achieving their college dreams. The Campaign for College Opportunity serves as primary convener of this coalition, but as you see in the next slide, we are joined by an incredibly rich network of stakeholders in that fight to protect college opportunity for undocumented students. As you see in this slide, you can see the breadth and strength of the coalition. Together, over the last 3 years, the coalition has successfully secured funding for our UC, Cal State, and community colleges to provide free legal services. We've secured income-based repayment options for Dream Loan borrowers. We've fought for the successful consideration of undocumented students as priority recipients in the Cal Grant application. And we fought to ensure that there were service incentive grants for undocumented students that provide meaningful learning opportunities outside of the classroom. You can go to the next slide. We are here today primarily for 2 reasons. The COVID health crisis has laid bare the structural inequities in our financial aid system, and in many ways, they illuminate what we already knew. The pandemic, though, has hit our lowest income students the hardest, many of them struggling to afford the basic technology for online learning, on top of new or exacerbated food and housing insecurities. And those who face deeper challenges, however, are undocumented individuals who are ineligible for public relief efforts and unemployment benefits. Add to that, again, the rising uncertainty about the future of DACA and the means by which they would be able to bring in income. In fact, one of our fellows who just completed her 9-month fellowship with the Campaign for College Opportunity did some research around this very topic, anticipating the US Supreme Court decision, and wanted to quickly mobilize a strategy for how California can ensure that together we are identifying sources of funding to backfill that financial aid. And you will get to hear from her in a moment. In his updated budget proposal, Governor Newsom responded to the economic challenges brought on by COVID-19, and we saw significant cuts to the UC, the Cal State, and our community colleges. Philanthropic foundations have raised millions in emergency aid, and all public segments of higher education, the UC, Cal State, community colleges, have agreed to allocate funding for undocumented students in their systems so that they ensure our vulnerable students are not left empty-handed. These efforts, however, are not nearly enough to meet the demand of the tens of thousands of students in need. And while the coalition continues to urge state policymakers to allocate targeted money in the state budget to expand this support, we also call on everyone on this webinar to build on that momentum by utilizing your existing programs and budgets to earmark emergency financial support for undocumented students. Recently, the California Community College Chancellor's Office has issued guidance to our community colleges that provide more flexibility and clarity on how those program dollars can be used. And you will hear more about those programs from one of our speakers, our former fellow, their innovative uses, and you will have an opportunity to ask the Chancellor's Office questions about that guidance. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it along to my colleague at the Chancellor's Office, Michael Q, who is the Dean of Educational Services and Support for the California Community College Chancellor's Office.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Linda. I wanted to first start out and talk to everybody and say that California community colleges embrace diversity in all forms. We believe that all people have the right to access quality higher education. And in particular, our Chancellor, Eloy Ortiz Oakley, is a staunch supporter and has shown unwavering commitment to undocumented students. Most recently, the CEO has led a case against the Department of Education and its treatment of undocumented students in the CARES Act, leaving 800,000 or more students left out. So the Chancellor's Office knows now more than ever that we must continue to offer clear pathways and resources for undocumented students to attain their educational goals. And it's imperative that our students know that our campuses remain supportive, accessible, open, and safe to them. College-bound undocumented students are courageous, resilient, and resourceful, and our system needs to embrace them. We can do this in our system because equity is at the core of all of our work. It all starts with our vision for success that enables us to stay focused on equity. Our vision for success focuses on degree attainment, less units to degree, transfer, obtaining jobs in the field of study, reducing equity gaps, and regional attainment gaps, all with the stream of equity in the center of all of that. But not that that's only just that our North Star, but it's important because our system is the primary entry point for college, collegiate degree programs, delivering career education and workforce training, adult education, apprenticeship, English as a second language courses, and sorts of lifelong learning for opportunities for all of our diverse communities. But what's even more important about this vision for success that we can all colleges and everyone in our system can point to, there are commitments that go along with it, which kind of sets values along with this equity-focused work. And that one that I really ascribe to, and I think is important for us to talk about today, is the commitment that says, design with the student in mind. Design with the student in mind. Institutionalizing undocumented student support is one step, but having administrative staff, frontline staff, student staff, staff across the campus embrace and have it acculturized to make them feel welcome is a whole nother thing. So ensuring that we have a vision and then we have policy supporting that vision is incredibly important in creating that culture and that structure that's necessary. And why is it necessary? Because we have 50 to 70,000 undocumented students in our system in the California community colleges. And we are trying with the vision to close equity gaps. And that 50 to 70,000 undocumented students are crucial to closing those gaps. We are trying to do equitable placement, guided pathways, dreamer liaisons, dreamer research, all things that help us. Most recently, and Linda referred to it, we put out a guidance memo, and it was around May 6th, about direct emergency aid to students, which allowed us to kind of show the flexibility in all of our existing programmatic opportunities that can use direct aid to students, EOPs, the promise programs, to student equity and achievement. All of this issuance and guidance really focuses us back to saying all of those recommendations on that Dreamers Project report we are trying to implement. But it's not just in the words and that vision, but we're trying to do it in funding as well. Our student-centered funding formula is all about ensuring that colleges are funded, but it also now has a supplemental allocation that is based upon the numbers of students receiving Promise Grant, Pell Grant, AB 540 students. So we're trying to do this not only through a vision and structure, through policies and guidance, and through funding, because we've also allowed for incredible flexibility now with some of our categorical programs to allow for colleges to spend the money necessary for dream centers and dreamer liaisons and providing emergency aids, especially during this time. So we make change and institutionalize undocumented student support by accomplishing the following. We create a vision that focuses on equity. We institute equitable placement to close those equity gaps. We implement guided pathways to ensure pathways and persistence for undocumented students. And we create flexible funding structures and opportunities for undocumented students. Community colleges have a critical role to play in addressing the country's greatest challenges. We are responsible for workforce development, human capital formation, local and regional economic development, technical and vocational training, and community service. At the Chancellor's Office, we're trying to break down the structures that limited us in the past, and we are creating new systems, policies, and funding mechanisms that enable us not only to serve our undocumented students, but all our marginalized groups to thrive in our system. Community colleges are the cornerstone of higher education in America, and undocumented students play a major role in its success. I thank all of you attending today for all that you have done and all that you will do in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael. And now I'd like to bring on the Campaign for College Opportunities Public Affairs Fellow, Jocelyn Carrera.
Hello and good morning, everybody. My name is Jocelyn, and I recently completed a 9-month fellowship program with the Campaign for College Opportunity. My work was focused on supporting the outreach and coalition efforts of the organization. Since early on in my fellowship, I have had the opportunity to engage in important conversations and meetings with members of the California Undocumented Higher Education Coalition regarding concerns about the financial aid gap among undocumented students, which would be exacerbated with the potential loss of DACA permits. These concerns motivated me to produce a brief and conduct research to anticipate how California community colleges can quickly mobilize to provide targeted supports, mitigate the growing financial and resource gaps, and maintain access and retention for all undocumented students. This discussion became even more critical given the economic crisis that has resulted from the global pandemic. Responding to these needs and concerns, the Campaign for College Opportunity and the partners on this call quickly came together to create this resource for all of you. As you heard from Linda earlier, even before COVID-19, there were inequities, and the global health crisis illuminated these structural inequities that plague our financial aid system. Although California has been a trailblazer in enacting innovative practices and programs, financial aid options for undocumented students fall short in covering non-tuition costs that make up the majority of a student expenses. The financial aid gap is greatest for undocumented students who are ineligible for several of the resources that are available to assist low-income students, including the Pell Grant federally subsidized loans and work study. They are also at the bottom of the eligibility pool for a competitive Cal Grant, which serves as the primary source of aid for tuition and living expenses for non-traditional students. Next slide, please. According to a survey conducted by the California Undocumented Higher Education Coalition, when asked about the unique circumstances that undocumented students are facing during this pandemic, over 90% of survey respondents indicated that a parent or family member has lost their primary source of income. Lack of financial resources without work or help from family, as well as the fear of not receiving public benefits, have been major sources of fear and anxiety amongst undocumented students, and have even led to increased pressure for some to withdraw from college. If the Supreme Court upholds the decision to rescind DACA, all undocumented individuals will lose access to work permits and social security numbers, giving them even less means to finance their education. This survey is very informative and indicates that the most pressing needs for our undocumented individuals at this moment are emergency aid. Next slide, please. At a time that limited resources, the unknown effects of the COVID-19 crisis, and the uncertain future of DACA conspired to lock the door of higher education for our undocumented individuals, California community colleges can leverage the California Promise Program, Extended Opportunity Program and Services, and Student Equity and Achievement Program to backfill the growing financial aid and resource gaps to address college affordability, retention, and equity concerns. So what are these programs? All three programs are explicitly designed to reduce achievement gaps among underrepresented students in the California community college system. California Promise programs are intended to increase college readiness, completion rates, transfer rates, and close achievement gaps. C programs are meant to advance the system-wide goal to boost achievement for all students with an emphasis of eliminating achievement gaps for students from traditionally underrepresented groups, and EOPs are meant to establish and implement programs that promote the enrollment of low income and educationally disadvantaged students and assist them in achieving their education goals. Next slide, please. Oh, can you go back to 2 slides? Okay. To achieve these goals, colleges are afforded wide discretion and flexibility to allocate the funds to best meet their student needs. AB 19 indicates that colleges have the discretion to decide what is best for their students. Colleges may but are not required to use funding to waive tuition and fees for full-time students, and the funds can be used in the way that best see fit to meet the goals of the legislation, including supporting or expanding existing campus resources and programming. With the C program, colleges have flexibility to use funds toward a variety of programs, activities, and supports related to success and equity, including emergency aid to students. And EOPs can be used to establish extended opportunity services, including but not limited to loans, grants, scholarships, and job assistance programs, and funds are intended to supplement and not supplant existing resources. With the recent guidance from the California Community College Chancellor's Office, greater flexibility has been provided to programs to allow colleges to grow in the ways in which they can support students in financial crisis, especially those that were excluded from the CARES Act. The guidance encourages colleges to use the California Promise funds to waive tuition fees or support the Vision for Success goals, including providing direct aid to students via cash grants, gas cards, etc. And the C funds are recommended to be used to, or use a portion of the C funds to provide direct aid to students experiencing unforeseen hardships such as the COVID-19 impacts, and there's no cap on the amount of C funds that can be used toward emergency aid. For EOPs, funds may be used to provide grants or loans, and the grant and loan limits as well as the timelines have been suspended during the pandemic. These 3 programs are especially promising due to the opportunity for community colleges to take a more comprehensive approach in helping students succeed. These programs tend to have student supports built into the program design and can be used to provide students with support services in addition to a financial award. There serves as an opportunity for colleges to provide undocumented students with financial support as well as much needed academic, emotional, and practical supports to help them cope with the stress, fear, and anxiety that has come with the rising uncertainty about their future and ensure retention as well as a timely path to college completion. In the absence of federal support, these programs, as well as other programs that do not couple DACA status with program eligibility, will be critical in helping to fill the growing financial aid and resource gaps and maintaining access to post-secondary education for all undocumented students. Colleges are encouraged to be innovative in using existing pools of funding and resources available to provide much needed aid, but also explore ways to provide undocumented students with institutionalized and pragmatic resources that promote long-term success. And there are going to be 2 community college representatives that will go over how they approach providing targeted supports for undocumented students on their campuses. But first, we want to create space for Q&A. Thank you, everybody. And if you have any questions, Michael Q would be more than happy to provide further clarity on the guidance that was recently issued.
Thank you, Jocelyn. I appreciate all of the great work that you've done with the campaign over the last 9 months. Jocelyn's overview, as well as the resources that were shared today, will be available to all of you in a follow-up email. But now, if you do have any questions for the Chancellor's Office, Linda with the campaign, or for Jocelyn, you may use the chat feature to ask any relevant questions. And we will be going into a little bit of a deeper dive shortly after this Q&A break on how 2 of our colleges have been able to institutionalize this support. But for now, if there are any questions with regards to funding streams or funding formulas, please use the Q&A or the chat feature to ask any relevant questions.
Alonso, I'm wondering if you might be willing to just pick a few of the questions that are coming up in the chat feature or in the Q&A and have Michael or I answer them live. I see a lot of really good questions coming in.
Thank you, Linda. Yes. There was a question regarding employment of undocumented students and career readiness. Linda, do you have any insight, or Michael?
On the employment, for those who are undocumented but don't have DACA, what I'm going to do, because I am not an expert in employment in this regard, there are a few helpful resources that a number of our coalition partners have, and I'm going to drop them into the chat link. I think, Margaret, you answered that, you asked that question. Really helpful links offered by the Undocumented Student Program at UC Berkeley. And Michael, I'll defer to you, but I believe even the Chancellor's Office has some resources online about those options for undocumented but non-DACA permit holders.
Thank you, Linda, for that answer. Michael, could you share a little bit more about the emergency aid memo and if there will be further emergency aid to assist undocumented students through transfer?
So right now, what we're trying to do, and to be quite honest, we're trying to, I don't know if we're going to get any more funds. What we're trying to do is not lose any funds during this budget process. So it really, right now, we are waiting until June 15th until we know where our budget lies, and then we can determine where we have availability for funding and flexibility and so forth. And then we have to regroup at that time. But right now, we're trying to ensure that no funds are lost to any of the programs that serve our students. And that is our main concern right now. And if we can do that, then we can regroup to see what we can do to with those existing funds that we do have.
Thank you, Michael. And that sort of leads into the other question about any additional resources that are going to be available to EOPs programs to support undocumented students. As you mentioned, all of our programs are kind of stretched to a limit. So I think we're going to be waiting for the budget before we issue any additional guidance. Well, thank you, everybody, for your questions. For those that we were not able to get to today, we will definitely be following up with our email to answer any of the questions that are remaining. But for now, we will be moving on to hear a little bit more about how some of our institutions have been able to use these funding streams to support undocumented students on their campus. And right now, I'd like to pass it over to our partners at Chabot College, Abigail Garcia-Patton, the HSI director, and she manages the Dream Center. She'll be able to share a little bit of insight as to how they've been able to use and allocate these resources to support their student population at Chabot College. Welcome,
Good morning,
Abigail.
everyone. Thank you so much. Good morning. Again, my name is Abby Garcia-Patton, and I am the Hispanic Serving Institutional Director at Chabot College. I manage El Centro, which is a one-stop friendly resource center for Latinx and our low-income students and their families. The Dream Center, which is a resource center for undocumented students, and our adult education program. It's my pleasure to be here with you today to share about what funding sources and resources we leverage to support our undocumented student population at Chabot. Next slide, please. At Chabot College, the work of supporting undocumented students began over 10 years ago with few dedicated faculty that also supported the creation of our Dreamers Club, which has been established since 2015. Over the years, and especially in response to the draconian immigration policies of this new administration, Chabot College has mobilized as a community to ensure we are ready to serve our undocumented students. In 2017, largely due to the organizing of students, staff, and faculty at Chabot College, our district approved our 2 colleges as sanctuary districts. After 3 years of using SEA funds to support this work, in November of 2019, Chabot College was awarded the California Catalyst Grant, which has allowed us to create a space, open up our Dream Center, and expand our services to be more targeted and comprehensive. Next slide. As I mentioned, we have received, we are a recipient of the California Campus Catalyst Grant, and we are currently at the end of our year 2 with an opportunity to renew for 1 more year. Our Catalyst Grant supports our Dream Center coordinator, our student programming, our Undocu-Ally training, a laptop lending program, student assistance, and we also have had, I know there was a question about hiring students. We've had a fellowship program to be able to hire students that are not DACA recipients. And we've also been able to fund our outreach specialists through our Catalyst grant. As I mentioned, the student equity funds have been used to support our Dream Center and continue to support our Dream Center with supporting programming activities like the Undocu Week, student field trips and recognition celebratory events. And so we still continue to utilize the funds that were first appropriated through SEA. Our Friends of Chabot College Foundation, due to the generous donation from the Stupski Foundation and the United Way, we were able to purchase laptops to give to undocumented students and have distributed emergency funding as soon as we were sheltered in place. And we will be doing a second release of funding. The first portion of it was students had to apply. And so as you know, with our undocumented communities, it's always really sensitive to have to say that you are undocumented or check that box. So what we've decided to do for the second round is actually just identify students and being able to support students automatically rather than having them go through an application. So we will be doing full distribution of the funds that we currently have through the foundation to be able to support all of our documented students who did not receive the first portion of funding. And the foundation has been a great partner of ours. They have stepped up every time we need funding for undocumented student population. And we have opened up all our scholarships at Chabot College so that any student can apply, including an undocumented student. And there are a few scholarships dedicated specifically for undocumented students. So we're really happy with the partnership that we have with our foundation. We also were designated a regional legal services hub, and this was through Assembly Bill 1809 through the California Community Colleges Foundation. So we used to rely on the California Campus Catalyst Grant to provide the legal services. Now, thankfully, we are able to, for the next 2 years, provide legal services at our college. And even in shelter in place, we have continued to do our legal clinic all online or via Zoom with the East Bay Community Law Center. So that's been a really great partnership that we hoping that it actually extends past the 2 years. And then I have the District Reserve Rollback, which I'll dive into in the next slide, please. So the District Reserve Rollback is one-time funding from our district designated to initiatives and programs that can demonstrate alignment with the work of meeting our SCIF metrics. And our community college district created a competitive process to designate funds to support meeting the metrics by submitting this proposal. And the proposal that we submitted and the metrics that we identified that most closely align with the work that we're doing are increasing AB 540 numbers, increasing our fee waiver numbers, and increasing our non-credit coursework. But as you know, when we increase the number of our AB 540 numbers, it creates a cascade. We then increase the number of our fee waivers, because students are now able to apply, it increases our number of students attending full-time, because they can now pay in-state tuition. It increases the number of students who will receive a certificate or degree. And so I think this is really important in terms of having conversations with fund managers and with even your college leadership around funding and supporting undocumented student issues. There's a return of investment. When we invest in our undocumented students, we see a return of investment. And essentially our proposal says, if you are able to fund us to be able to provide counseling hours and an outreach specialist and marketing materials, if you fund us in that, then we will be able to have a return of investment for the college. It will pay for itself in threefold because of our SCIF metrics. And so that's something really important for, as you're thinking and you're asking, how do you come to the table and have these conversations to keep that in mind? Next slide, please. It's also an opportunity to be incredibly creative because of the budget constraints and the budget issues that we will see for years to come. And so we've been able to already start leveraging and institutionalizing our services for our Dream Center and the programming for our undocumented students. Through our AB-19 funds, we have been able to leverage personnel. We have, for example, the financial aid outreach specialist that is paid through AB-19 funds, who works really close with our outreach specialists at the Dream Center to not only identify Dream Center, AB 540 students and students who may be eligible to complete the Dream application, but they collaborate in doing Cash for College days at the various school sites, both high schools and adult schools. Through our Chabot Promise and through the work of our outreach specialists, we've also are making sure that the students are completing their Dream application and also that they're enrolling full-time, because this will then give them free tuition for a year. So full-time and completing of the Dream application will get the students a free tuition for their first year at Chabot. The AB-19 funds have also supported our Southern California College Tour, which is one of our big transfer initiatives where we take students to Southern California and expose them to the various colleges, have them talk to financial aid reps and also college reps. And we have designated seats for our undocumented students that we want to make sure that we have them in our bus and are having access to these resources. And that large part of that tour is paid through AB-19 funds. AB-19 funds also pays our Summer Bridge program, a large portion of our Summer Bridge program, which is a transitional program for new students. Again, we want to make sure that we have undocumented students in our Summer Bridge program, and so we funnel them through our outreach specialists. We also leverage our work at El Centro. El Centro, our Dream Center is located in the space of El Centro. We also provide, as El Centro, technical and budgetary support for our Dream Center, and we support with all of the programming as well. Our adult education programming, some of our counselors at the Dream Center are paid through our adult education program, and we do some cross-training. We make sure to do cross-training with the adult schools around AB 540 and vice versa. And so it's a great opportunity for us to expand the capacity and knowledge of people to understand AB 540 and residency reclassification. And then obviously we leverage our Puente and our EOPs programs, both in funneling students into those programs that are eligible. They also provide scholarship support for undocumented students. And it's really about leveraging the communities and partnering with those communities to be able to make sure that our undocumented student populations are having these resources and spaces. And our admissions and records office and our financial aid office, we've been working closely with both in terms of, one, getting data from them, and so that we can reach our undocumented student population and we can increase our AB 540 numbers. I'm happy to report that our goal for this SCIF proposal was for 50 new students, 50 new undocumented AB 540 students. And we actually are at 83 new students. So we surpassed our goal, 83 new AB 540 students, which is all in the collaboration that we've been able to do with our admissions and records office and financial aid office. We're also streamlining processes with both admissions and records and financial aid office. We want to limit the amount of obstacles that we have for our undocumented students. So we're simplifying documents, we're making documents more accessible, and we're supporting our students. We tell them, before you submit anything to admissions and records, submit it to share it with the Dream Center so that we can review it and we can make sure you have all the documents in place, so that once A&R gets it, all they need to do is stamp it. And then with our financial aid office, we also have, through BFAP, we have a financial aid advisor that's specifically dedicated in serving undocumented students. And so that the financial aid office advisor goes through the DREAM applications and makes sure that the students are completing the steps almost in a case management level. And we're also identifying through data collection, identifying students that may be eligible to complete the DREAM app that haven't already done so. I think this concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Abigail. That's a super helpful presentation. And now we'll turn it over to our second case study. Dario Fernandez, the director of the DREAM program at Mount San Antonio College, will share a little bit about how he's been able to use some of these equity dollars in different funding streams to support the DREAM Center on his college. And just as a friendly reminder, we'll please ask any relevant questions in the chat and we'll answer them as quickly as we can. And any that we cannot answer today, we will be following up with you directly. Thank you, Dario.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dario Fernandez, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the DREAM program at Mount San Antonio College. I've been in this role for about a year now, and I've learned quite a bit about the impact of not only the advocacy, but of having dedicated staff within a program that is tasked with addressing the nuanced needs of our undocumented students at the community college. So that is the context and the scope of what I will be sharing with you today. It's really important to note that our DREAM program is housed within our Equity Center on campus, and that recently opened. It's under a year and a half, right? So it's still very new. But what that also means is that we have a direct line of communication with 4 other equity funded programs. The REACH program for our current and former foster youth, the ARISE program, which is our ANAPISI grant that focuses on addressing the challenges and the needs of our Asian American and Native American Pacific Islander students, and ASPIRE, our Black and African American students. We are also directly reporting to our Associate Dean of Student Success and Equity, Dr. Eric Lara. So that provides a lot of opportunities for really creative and innovative ways to think about how to best serve our students, where there might be overlapping identities as well. So as we've heard, you know, this work has been going on, you know, since before we had a formalized institutional program. But more recently, right, like on many campuses, the impetus for the development of institutional support was, you know, the establishment of the DACA program in 2012, but also the California DREAM Act in 2013, 2014. So that's what really drove this kind of need to really think through how to institutionally support and create a mechanism, an infrastructure to better support our students. So in 2014 is when pre-existing staff was allocated to support students that were coming through the pipeline. The DREAM program officially opened in 2015 with full-time counselor. In 2016, that was added on. And in that first year, we served over 500 students, right? And if you think about, you know, starting a program for undocumented students, the challenge is always in identifying the students and reaching out to them. And I know that's one of the questions that's been brought up in the chat. So it shows the incredible reach that the staff had in identifying and fostering that trust with our students. In 2019, a full-time director was hired, myself, but then the campus also committed, in light of the rescindment of DACA, the increasing need Legal Services, they provided funding for 3 years. This was prior to the Immigration Services Legal Services Project at the community college level. And just before we turned to remote online instruction, we hired a full-time specialist for the DREAM program. So that was very, very timely, and we've been adjusting as needed. So this is kind of a telltale sign of how the development of support, specifically with staffing, has looked like at Mount SAC. Next slide, please. Now, what does the funding look like for these positions? Well, as SSSP money and student equity money has now been consolidated into one funding stream, the Student Equity and Achievement Program now funds our director position, our full-time counselor, our additional adjunct counseling support, and our discretionary program budget. Now, in times like the ones we are in now with the pandemic and anticipated budget shortfalls, one of the potential challenges that could exist at different campuses is as cost of living adjustments go up, but as the overall budget stays relatively the same or is lessened, then your discretionary budget really takes a hit, right? So that's one of the challenges that I know has been experienced at different campuses, and I've heard from some of my colleagues. So it's something to definitely consider, but knowing that it's really incredible. It's important because for us, we know that we've been able to delegate the various intervention points where our advocacy is needed to really transform campus policies and practices that oftentimes and needlessly and unintentionally exclude undocumented students. Sometimes, the presumption of U.S. citizenship and access to a social security number is still very pervasive in higher ed. And we know these barriers exist at all levels, within the faculty and academic realm, in management conversations, and how students experience our program and other programs that they might be in. But specifically, how frontline staff are able to help them navigate that. And having staffing at all those various levels have really facilitated our ability to engage in this consistent and thorough needs assessment, both in formalized ways, through administration of needs assessment surveys, but also through the conversations that we have with our students and amongst our staff. Our work with the Mount SAC Foundation has enabled us to raise funds for DACA renewals and also to ensure that we have funding for emergency purposes for basic needs. We know that that's not always enough with the number of students that we're identifying and serving, but nonetheless, it's been a huge, huge source of support as we think through how to identify additional sources. And I think most importantly too, is some of the recent support has come directly from district general funds. So our DREAM program specialist is funded directly through general funds and district funds. And so has the support, the financial support for our attorney. Next slide, please. So these are some of the key partnerships that I wanted to highlight, where we've been able to support undocumented students beyond the staffing and the resources and the services within our program. We provide, a wide variety of services for our students that are, tailored to address, their specific needs, how to navigate not only the campus, but, society in general, from, early adulthood, adolescence, and into early adulthood. So with high school outreach, our partnership, has really meant that we're able to deliver presentations to our feeder high schools. We know where our undocumented students come from, which high schools, which communities they're in. And we're very intentional. The partnership has been very intentional at delivering key presentations about, not only the California DREAM Act, but really informing them about all the different resources that exist for undocumented students, and not just at Mount SAC, but in general and across the systems of higher education. We want to make sure that our support of undocumented students stretches beyond whether they're going to be a Mount SAC student or not. As was mentioned earlier, partnerships with admissions and records and financial aid are extremely important in helping navigate the AB 540 and the SB 68 process. and making sure that any updates or any changes are really communicated thoroughly and at the various literacy levels that they need to be for our students, especially those students that might be coming in through non-traditional pathways through adult basic education programs. Our designation as a campus or as a partner college through the Dream.us National Scholarship also enables us to provide a little more financial support for those students. To date, I think we have in the neighborhood of 34 Dream.us scholars, and they're able to obtain up to $29,000 for their undergraduate education, which is a huge plus in light of some of the lack of access to financial aid at the federal level. And also, really ensuring that we're supporting our, I already mentioned students coming in from non-traditional pathways, but really ensuring that we're preparing students to understand their eligibility for AB 540 and SB 68 once they transfer, once they're getting ready to transfer. So as part of our transfer process, we are ensuring that they really understand how the residency and AB 540 processes are different at the UC and the CSU, right? And how they're similar, but we want to make sure that part of the literacy that they obtain is they know where they stand in relation to AB 540 and SB 68 once they're ready to transfer. Our partnership with EOPs has really helped by providing additional counseling and financial support when we haven't had the amount of resources or hours in counseling to be able to support all the students that need our support. We have an overlap of 80 DREAM and EOPS students. So that provides an additional layer of not only the counseling support, but seeing that these programs are working together to address some of the most challenging and pressing needs that they're experiencing, that their families are experiencing, I know has been crucial, especially during the pandemic. And most importantly, I think most recently, the Immigration Legal Services Project has really given us an important resource. I know I feel so much more comfortable, especially pending the DACA Supreme Court case, knowing that we have an attorney that's providing services and workshops and events and this critical information. So, and also discovering potential pathways for our students who might be able to adjust their status, but they've never been able to access free and trusted vetted legal services that, they, might just not know where they stand in relation. So these have been some of the key takeaways. There's still much work to be done. I think the biggest takeaways, and one thing I want to highlight is, the need to proactively run reports and data on our undocumented students to be ready for creative and innovative ways to support, especially as resources become available. Oftentimes, and I've seen this happen across the board at different campuses, is we get stuck trying to define the parameters and trying to identify our students. But if we have this already, it could be a much more streamlined process. And I think that's one of the challenging things that I think we're all tasked to doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dario. That was really insightful, and I appreciate you sharing your expertise. And now I'd like to bring back Linda Vasquez to close us out.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you so much for our speakers. Way to go, Dario at Mount SAC, and your colleagues at Mount SAC, and Abigail at Chabot, and your team at Chabot. You're all doing amazing things, and thank you for sharing your experience and strategies for how you continue to support undocumented students. And I also want to thank everybody in the chat for chiming in, helping us field questions, and Nancy at Immigrants Rising for your help in providing resources to the many questions that are coming in. I am scanning the questions that are coming in the chat box, and I know that there's a Q&A feature. I think this tells us that we need to continue having these conversations because there are questions coming in around like engaging parents, seeking additional legal clarity on eligibility. And while we will work with the Chancellor's Office and our foundation partners to provide you with responses to all of the questions you've listed, it does, I think, get us thinking about how we can continue these conversations so that even as the situation rapidly evolves, that you are getting very timely information that allows you to inform and advise students appropriately. So Alonso, if you can move on to the next slide. I know we are cutting out on time and I'll be quick, but I want to get a good sense of everybody on this line. I'm really appreciative of everybody who has stayed with us, but tell us, by participating in the poll, what closely represents your role at a college or in your organization? Wow, so a lot of advisors, coaches, faculty, and college administrators, including community advocates. If you move on to the next slide, does it get rid of the poll? I don't want to get rid of the poll. Okay, let's close. Well, I mean, as you can see, great diversity in who we have represented on this call. And the reason why I ask is because, you know, we've heard up and down the state, many of them from people who are represented in this poll and on this call, is that, you know, people want to know how best to support undocumented students during this time. And absent federal leadership, I'm proud to know that California can continue to rise up and serve as an example to the nation. And recent guidance from the Chancellor's Office is one example of this leadership. What Mount Sac and Chabot is doing are two other examples. And so is your participation here today. And so you heard from a few college representatives and from the Chancellor's Office on what you can do. And so what does this mean for you? If you are an administrator, so you're at that top level of advocacy, you hold that power to make these important budget decisions. You hold that influential position on your campus to make decisions about those budget investments. And you've heard it loud and clear today that students need emergency aid and they need support. And you've heard some concrete examples of how you can take that back to your campus and how those dollars could be used. If you are, if you don't hold these budget powers, you have a voice, you know, and we urge you to take what you've heard today and initiate a discussion on your campus about those examples and elevate the need. Mobilize your colleagues to demand that your campus leaders invest in and prioritize aid for undocumented students. Engage your offices of financial aid, speak to your campus leadership, and provide public comment at your next Board of Trustees meeting. Again, one of the most powerful things you can do is use your voice. And with the budget about to be finalized in a few days, then you have to start thinking about what this means for your own campus, and you have a lot of power to influence how those dollars are used in your campus or in your district. If you are an undocumented ally at a college, at a university, or a nonprofit organization, you can continue to advising students about the resources that are available to them, and also mobilize an advocacy in the ways that I mentioned in, you know, in a college. If you go on to the next slide, Alonso, I did want to give a shout out to an undocumented student resource map that was created by the coalition in 2018 to allow current and prospective students know about the resources that are available to them at every single public college and university. And I don't know if he's on this call, but I want to give a huge thank you to Marcos Montes, who works with the Southern California College Access Network, who helped build a lot of, you know, who helped build this map. And you may remember last year and earlier this year that we reached out to all of the campuses across the state to verify your campus information and the resources that you have for your undocumented students. And since the map launched, it's actually received over 13,000 views. We've heard from students who are prospective first year or transfer students that they use this map to make informed decisions about which campus they're going to enroll in, because they can see which campus actually has a club or a Dream Resource Center or a liaison for them. And especially now that we're becoming, you know, reliant on distance learning and online tools, it's important that this map is accurate. And so we spend the last 2 months updating that information, and really encourage you to share this with your students and their families. If you go to that landing page, and Jocelyn, if you're on chat, please drop in the link we'll also share it after this webinar, but that has information about AB 540, eligibility, how you apply for it, and other forms of financial aid. And just to close out in the last slide, here is contact information for all of our speakers. I'm sorry I omitted Michael Q's email, but we will send that in a follow-up note. I apologize that we couldn't get to all of your questions in the chat feature, but just want to remind everyone, as Alonso has indicated, that this recording will be shared with all of the participants, along with a list of resources that I hope touch on the questions you've raised. And we will be working over the next few weeks in possibly creating like an FAQ document that provides you a response to the many questions you raised. I want to thank everybody on this call and all of our speakers for spending your morning with us. Juntos Podemos, and I want to thank you for your relentless work every day to ensure that undocumented students' dreams are not deferred. Thank you. Have a great day.